It is 6 p.m., so I will call this November 12th, 2024 regular meeting of the Wenatchee School District School Board to order. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Esta junta se lleva a cabo en inglés, pero contamos con servicio de traducción si alguien gusta hacer un comentario público o recibir explicaciones en español. Por favor, indique su necesidad. Before we start on the agenda, I just want to say hello to all of our family advocates and Core PAC folks in the audience. I think we'll be hearing from some of you a little bit later in the evening, but it's great to have you here. Now, to begin, let's work through the agenda. Are there any proposed changes or modifications to the agenda? Hearing none, let's move on to the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda were sent to the board and posted online last week. The board has had an opportunity to review the material and individually ask the superintendent any questions on any item on the agenda. This week's consent agenda includes the minutes from the October 22nd, 2024 regular board meeting, vouchers and payroll, personnel report, surplus report, contracts, field trips, the August 2024 financial, and the August 2024 financial report. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to present the consent agenda as described.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Martin, second by Tucker. Is there any discussion? And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Right.
None opposed. Moving on, we will now move on to citizen comment. Kim, do we have anyone signed up? Okay, I will skip my announcements. Next, moving on then to our special presentation.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. Just I want to echo Julie's sentiment. Just want to welcome everyone here tonight. We've got some very special presentations, and our first one to get started on is our strategic plan update. Big Six data point number 2, belonging and connecting. So I'd like to invite Alfonso Lopez and Nancy Navarro Ortiz to begin the presentation. Thank you so much for being here, everyone.
Now it's working. Let me begin. No, I'm just kidding. I was saying that as we know, our strategic plan has the Big Six that we all know. But today we are going to focus more on number 2, the belong and connected. What is what we need? What is what the Wenatchee School District is doing to belong and connect our families and our students? And what is under our responsibility as leaders in the Wenatchee School District, and specifically with these programs that we have, especially migrant bilingual special programs, and myself with my title of connecting with Latinos. Anyways, today we're going to talk about that. we are going to have an opportunity to meet every one of our team members, and I'm talking about our family advocates and also our PAC board. And when I said special teams for us, it's because we rely on them heavily for a lot of things that we do in the Wenatchee School District. So you're going to learn a little more about what they do. With that being said, I'm going to let our migrant coordinator, Mrs. Nancy Navarro Ortiz, to begin with some of the slides that we have here. So please welcome Mrs. Navarro Ortiz.
Thank you for the opportunity to tell you all about what we do to meet the Big Six, point number 2. We did discuss, and that's why you see the team here, that they were going to introduce themselves. So at your spot, like we discussed, we're gonna make sure we, give yourself, introduce your name, your position, and the number of years in that position. Is that okay, or would you rather have them come here? Okay, so Ruby, we're gonna start with you. There you go.
Good evening. My name is Ruby Lopez, and I am the migrant nurse case manager. This is my first year in the position, but I've enjoyed it, and I've got to serve a lot of our students already. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Veronica Mendoza. This is my 13th year as a family advocate.
Good evening. My name is Mayra Cortez. I am the migrant re-engagement advocate for both Wenatchee and Eastmont school districts. I have been here for about 2 months, so I'm still pretty new to the position. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nancy Sanchez and I'm at Washington Elementary and I've been a family advocate for 7 years.
Good evening. My name is Yuridia Lopez. I am the family advocate for John Newberry and Sunny's Local Elementary. And this is my 7th year being a family advocate.
Good evening. My name is Lorena Lima. I'm a family advocate at Lincoln Elementary School, and this is my 3rd year.
Hi, good evening. My name is Chelsea Chavez. I am the family advocate at Orchard Middle School. I have been the family advocate for 2 years now.
Hola, buenas tardes. Me llamo Lina Maldonado. I'm Lina Maldonado. I've been the family advocate to Pioneer Middle School for 20 years.
My name is Delia Sanchez. I'm a family advocate at Lewis and Clark Elementary, and this is my 9th year.
Okay, so some of them are not here, but as you can see, there's an extensive amount of years in as far as expertise goes. So,
Can we give them a?
yeah, please. Okay, once again, we're here to present about the Belong and Connected. So how do our family advocates and our migrant staff help the students be seen, valued, heard, and then how do they build relationships with the staff and their peers as far as healthy relationships go? So in our special programs here at the district office, we some of them did present themselves, and then some of us are not here. I know Teresa's hiding somewhere in there too, but Teresa's our migrant recruiter. She's the one that gets to welcome the families into the migrant program. She interviews them and then fills out COEs. Crystal's not here, but she is our records clerk, so she's in charge of making sure that she enrolls and withdraws our migratory students as they are making their moves. Ruby and Mayra are kind of still fairly new and learning their positions, but they have done a phenomenal job Ruby, our migrant case nurse manager, has already worked with some students, making sure that they are up to date in child checks, immunization, et cetera, and just phenomenal work with her. And then Mayra Cortez has, as she mentioned, recently started, and she is our migrant out-of-school youth re-engagement advocate. It's a big mouthful, but she is the one that works with our out-of-school youth to make sure that she helps them attain their goals, whether that is getting their GED, re-engaging into a high school program, or going through a career path. Carmela and Catalina are not here, but they are both our McKinney-Vento liaisons, and they are the ones that make sure that, you know, our families are taken care of as well. And then we kind of already introduced the other ones. Tim is not here either, but he is the one that takes care of our state and federal programs, grants, and all of that. So he's deep into that as well. With our family advocates that presented themselves, here they are. I'll talk about what they do specifically. I know some of them did not get a chance to come for other commitments, but our family advocates, and this is just a very tiny snippet of what they do in their day-to-day, but they are our link to the schools and families, community resources. They work with the administrators, the staff, the students, everyone in a school to make sure that they can provide and seek that support that each family needs. They know every single family in their school, and that's you know, phenomenal. They make sure that they know and meet every single family, every student, and that if there is a specific need, they're there to support. They seek support from the community resources, from the school-based program centers, and sometimes the migrant specialist positions in the district, and of course from each other, because as you heard, there's a lot of expertise in the room. They keep all their online tracking services you know, very organized, and they have to provide these services into our migrant system called MSIS. And their caseload also includes students in the McKinney-Vento program, multilingual students, newcomers. They work with migrant students, specifically the priority for service students. And they also do work such as packing friendship and making sure that you know, whichever family might need any support during the holidays, they provide those supports as well. Our migrant graduation specialists and student advocates at the high schools, none of them could make it today, but we do have Jonathan Godina. He works as a migrant graduation specialist at Westside High School. Lorena Pulido is our Wenatchee High School migrant graduation specialist. Rebecca Valdovinos and Jose Guillen Esquivel are the migrant student advocates also at the Wenatchee High School. So these positions are more focused on student academic. Lorena and Jonathan Jonathan works with all students at Westside High School. Lorena works with the 12th graders and the students that are, you know, higher needs. And then Becky and Jose work with the lower grades at the high school as well. And they work with building academic plans, making sure that the students are on track for graduating. They meet with them on an individual basis, sometimes as in a bi-weekly schedule, and they offer some leadership opportunities, college visits, volunteer opportunities, which we have 2 of them here, which you'll get to meet in a little bit. And then they also celebrate the success for the students as they are going through the school by holding a senior migrant night. And in this night, it's a very special night because families are invited. They get to thank their family members for, you know, the support that they received by their family to get to graduate. And then they get to wear a special graduation cord. these are some of the opportunities that pictures of the high schoolers that have experience, such as the leadership events, the senior nights, or the college visits. And then our migrant family advocates and our migrant graduation specialists meet on a monthly basis, and there's some other in-between meetings as well that they meet to discuss any relevant work that they need to be doing. So I have the pleasure of working with them on a monthly basis. And then this is our core pack members. They are here as well. Se pueden levantar para poder, simplemente levántense. This is the committee that in our migrant program. Thank you. Gracias. So they are on a volunteer basis. We have our president, Maria Vergara, vice president, Marisela Peña. Our sergeant of arms is Maria Castro, and she is also in the state advisory committee for migrant. Then our secretary, Teresa Godina. And then we added 2 new representatives, Cindy and Maria Herrera. And then we also have 2 student representatives, Aurora and Paloma. On the side, you see a list of the other parent representatives that also provide some great input for us. And their job is very important. They also meet with us here, either with ESD or here in the school, to provide important information as far as, for example, what topics they might suggest for our migrant family nights. And these nights, you can see a list of when those nights happen. They are organized to be culturally responsive nights. They're, in those nights, we have music, entertainment from the schools, childcare, food, anything that will eliminate any barrier for the families to come, and then to encourage them to come and learn what our students are doing at school, and then how they can support as well.
And that is just some of the things that they do, but I don't know if by choice, but we have added some other responsibilities to our special teams. And we are very proud to say that we are doing some things that even the state is copying us. One of the things that I want to mention is, for example, our team. We rely a lot on the family advocate team, and that's the first one that I'm going to speak to or about, because one of the things that we started 2 years ago is to invite them to come to pick up and collect information from the agencies that we have in town. So we have some meetings called interagency meetings. The agencies from town are coming to this room, and they share all these services that are available for families. And the way to collect that information is by bringing our special team, the family advocates. They take notes, they take flyers, they take information back to their schools, and they connect with the families. And that is a great way to know what is happening in the community, what services are there, and pass those services to our families. So that is something that we didn't have before. And in the state, some districts are copying that already, because that is a great way to communicate with our families. Now, when new parents come to schools, the first phase pretty much they see is this wonderful team. I'm not demeriting our admin teams and others in schools, but this team relied to these families that are in need, and they are sort of the first phase they see when they come, and they start trusting them. That's why I call them a special team. Not only that, but they are also pretty much all of them bilingual, and they are not only serving migrant and bilingual kids, they serve the entire population of students. There are families that come to our school speaking only English, and obviously our staff here is bilingual. They can address their needs as well. So that's why they are so important for us. The other one, another activity that they do is the multilingual nights. They come, they have booths when we have these meetings there. If you've been able to come to these wonderful multilingual nights where we see 300 to 400 people coming, you're going to see our family advocates there providing information or answering questions for the families. So they come also to these evening nights that we have. And I mentioned this already, the interagency meetings. They come, they collect the information. A lot of information is shared during these meetings, the multilingual nights and also the interagency meetings, and this team is collecting all that information. But not only that, but we also have asked them to help us to interpret when we have second language learner families, families that do not speak English, and they come to meetings, especially important, very important meetings like the IEP meetings. Some of our families need interpretation, and who better than the ones that they know? And that is our family advocates. They are interpreting during those meetings as well. So as you can see, they are really, really busy helping in different ways. The reason why we are taking advantage of them is that, first of all, they are well known in their schools. Secondly, they are bilingual. They can serve everybody. And thirdly, they are so good that they are willing to help us. I'm going to finalize just by pointing out also another important team that we have, and we are serving as a model in the state again. And I'm saying that because I'm around in different conferences and schools, visiting schools and all of that. And one of the things that we do here in Wenatchee is our PAC, our Parent Advisory Council. They are serving like another board for our school district. But many times we are asking them to give us some input, and many times they don't know exactly what to respond. The reason is that we haven't had a chance to visit the schools and see what is needed, how our schools are operating. So last year we started visiting schools here in Wenatchee, elementary, middle, and high school. We had a chance to visit them with this wonderful team, and I'm talking about the PAC. And after we visited those schools, now they know a lot more how our schools are operating. And that's what we want. We want their input. We want them to know how we're working so we can work together. They can bring us some ideas. So that is just one special activity that our PAC does, along with other ones. Like being present here tonight, expect to see them more often here during these meetings, because we are determined that they need to learn how to run the meetings in a better way, I guess. So with that being said, I'm going to finalize this by saying thank you very much to all of you for giving us a chance to speak to you. But we are still here for questions. Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say thank you for the work that each and every one of you guys are doing. One of the things that we've learned from our student surveys and our staff and student surveys, and when we developed the strategic plan, was that our students need to be seen, heard, and valued, and otherwise we're not creating a safe environment for them to learn. And this presentation couldn't have been any more timelier given our current situation. One of the things that I presented to Superintendent Kalahar last week was as the administration changes, there's going to be a lot of fear in a lot of our vulnerable populations, students that we serve in our families. And you guys are doing amazing work. And I think we're not naive in knowing that your work is going to get harder. Because like Mr. Lopez said, not to downplay the work that the administrators do, but you guys are the face and a source of information trust, especially for our most vulnerable students and families. So I commend you for the work. Know that on behalf of me, and I don't want to speak for the whole board, but you have my support. I'm getting a lot of smiles and head nods for the support from the board on the work that you guys are doing and the work that you guys are going to be faced with. And just know that this is not the sole responsibility of our family advocates or our board PAC members, but as a school board, as leadership administrators. So thank you.
Also like to add some comments from two perspectives. This morning, most of you were in the same room, along with about 40 representatives of social organizations and social services in the Valley. Nod at you. So family advocates, nurse, out of school, graduation specialists, you are kind of like the heart of every one of these schools, making sure nobody slips through the cracks or working on that. And that's really valuable and much appreciated. I'm going to take something I was going to say at the end of the meeting in a different context from Mr. Lopez. Lots of other school districts copy Wenatchee School District programs, and this is one area where you see a lot of it. So you really do represent that. Then I want to talk a little bit. I happen to be on the State Advisory Committee along with Maria Castro. And Teresa Godina used to be on that. So Wenatchee has representations on that State Advisory Committee in that area. And so we kind of see what goes on. I see what goes on alongside the Parent Advisory Council and the great work that you do. And I'm proud to be associated with them and to know them. Also, I want to welcome our two students as well. That's another voice that really matters. So basically, you rarely represent something pretty marvelous. Estén sumamente bienvenidos aquí. Muchísimas gracias a todos.
Any other questions? Thank you all so much for being here. It sounds like it's been a pretty long day, but I know you do some great work for the district and our students, so I really appreciate you being here and taking the time to share it with us. And feel free to stick around for the rest of the meeting, but if you have better things to do, you are free to go, and we won't think anything of it.
Yep, perfect transition time. Thank you everyone for being here. I love your glasses. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Thanks for taking time out of your evening to be with us. Sean, this doesn't say anything about your presentation at all. It is going to be riveting and engaging. So we appreciate you. But yeah, let's invite Sean Fitzgerald, Executive Director of Business and Finance, to join us for the 23-24 end of year report. Thanks, Sean. And there should be a clicker and tissue up there at the podium, just in case.
I think I will need both after that mass exodus. That's all right. Thank you. All right, good evening. President Norton, members of the board, Dr. Kalahar, here tonight to present on our year-end presentation for the 2023 24 school year. This encompasses the fiscal year from September 1st through August 31st. And then in the months of the last 2 months, September and October, finance has been working diligently on closing out the year-end books. We are required to submit our financial statements to the ESD for review by October 25th. And so here we are. So as background, the district fund structure, again, you've seen this slide before, but school districts are organized and operated on the fund basis system of accounting, which are self-balancing sets of accounts designed to accomplish specific objectives or purposes. The district has 5 funds: the general fund, ASB, debt service, capital projects, and the transportation vehicle fund. We'll begin with the general fund, our largest fund, which makes up about 90% of our activity. And the general fund incorporates all activities except those to be accounted for in another fund. So it covers all school district activity unless it's required to be elsewhere, and is focused on general day-to-day operations of the school district. And then all school districts are required to have a general fund. Moving on to our revenues and our breakout for year end. So as you can see, we finished the year at about $127 million in revenue, which is on par with last year. About 77% or 3/4 of our revenue sources come from the state, which is primarily driven by enrollment. Some of the key indicators and just I want to point out is our local support non-tax. One of the things, reasons we did better than expected budget-wise this year was our investment interest income that's invested in the local government investment pool. We had about $850,000 in revenue, which was a nice windfall that was contributed to our overall revenue. Here is the same data. However, I've broken out the data by excluding budget capacity. So we include budget capacity to account for unknown revenues or expenditures that may occur during the year that we are unaware of at the time of budget adoption in August. So for example, we may receive a grant in February. So we're halfway through the school year, which we were not expected to weren't expecting to receive in August. So we build in this extra amount to account for those unknowns without having to go back to the board for any sort of budget revision. But once you can see the kind of the comparison between with capacities, we have about $131 million budgeted, but once we remove that excess amount, it comes out to about a little over $124 million. So we did about 2% better than budgeted projections. Here is the same data compared actual for August of 24 compared to the 22-23 school year, just in a different format. One of the things I just like to point out is our federal special purpose. You see a slight decrease this year, but a lot of that contains our ESSER dollars. And so this has been decreasing over the last several years. And we had about $2.8 million this last year, which has been used all up. So that one column there will continue to decline when I'm giving this presentation next year, as the ESSER dollars have completely left the system. Focusing on expenditures, so we finished about $127.6 million. That excludes the transfer out for the softball field, when all in total is about $133.2 million. Even though when we exclude the transfer out to the capital projects fund, it was an increase of about $2.8 million from prior year. So revenue staying on par from year to year, but our expenditures have increased by $2.8 million. And for context, we did reduce for the 23-24 school year about $4.5 million. So despite all those reductions, we still spent almost $3 million more in comparison to the prior year. Regular instruction includes basic education, and it continues to be the district's main expenditure classification. Go ahead, Julie.
Sorry, I have a question that may take you back to the first slide on revenues, because I'm looking at one that says the district reported an increase of 2.7 million from prior year in the revenue.
Right.
Corona.
Oh, thanks for pointing that. So distinguishing, so overall revenues remained on par with the prior year. But in comparison, when we start breaking it down, so if we look at our state funding, so state general purpose and state special purpose, we saw an increase in that revenue category of 2.7 million, but overall revenues remained the same essentially. So when we're kind of looking at variances between expenditures and budget, and on the next slide, I'll have a breakout of comparison of budget with and without capacity. But some of the variances that we were noticing due to district not hiring to budgeted staffing levels, COVID stimulus money that usually would have been assigned to, say, funding out of basic education, we were able to fund out of ESSER dollars and reducing discretionary spending. When I was doing this presentation last year, when we had the regular instruction column, we had a variance of about $5 million. So in comparison to this year, we have about 59.5 compared to 57.3. So it's a difference about $2 million. So less ESSER dollars is narrowing that gap between what we are currently spending in those categories. Once we remove out excess budget capacity, we can see that actual comparison to budget was about 99%. So pretty on point with where we were looking for. And again, if we're kind of just breaking out budget capacity, most of that is in our other instructional programs. So the other categories remain unaffected. Same data, just again, different presentation, different way of being presented. Again, focus on federal special purpose. We're seeing a decrease between August of 23-24 school year and the 22-23 school year. Again, that's primarily driven by the ESSER dollars. So less funding out of those categories. So here's the same data, but kind of broken out by objects. So this is kind of focusing on salaries and benefits and MSOC. As opposed to where the programs for these dollars were spent. So again, we see salaries and benefits made up almost 84% of total monthly expenditures. The state average is about 85%, so we're on track there. So that's about an increase of about $620,000. And then we saw an increase in our purchase services and a slight increase in our supplies and materials. And some of the increases in the purchase services. So we saw an increase of about 1.4 million. And a lot of this is due to our Stronger Connections grant, increase in running start enrollment, increase in insurance costs, and levy and pre-bond planning kind of make up part of, almost half, 2/3 of that increase of 1.4 million in purchase services. And again, the same data presented just in comparison to where we expected budget-wise, about 99% of the budget spent without capacity. Again, same data just presented in different format. Yeah. Now, year-end projection goals and analysis. So back in June, we projected a year-end fund balance of about 14.9 million. And we finished the year at 15.1 million. So we're only off about $150,000. So we're pretty on target with our projections. And then in comparison to the budget, we finished about $4.4 million better. And so back in June, as I said in the June 25th board presentation, again, yes, we finished about $4.4 million better than budget, but it's important to break this down because about 2.2 or half of this was due to savings from the prior year. So due to using one-time stabilization funding, including COVID and other ESSER dollars. And again, kind of the same reason, using the stabilization funding, not filling to 100% capacity for staffing, and then kind of reducing discretionary spending. And then the remainder of that was something we were factoring into our projections for reductions for the 24-25 school year. So part of that, we were talking about a target of about $2.5 million in MSOC and miscellaneous costs. So we were anticipating seeing some savings to finish off this year that we would target as part of our 24-25 reductions.
So Sean, that 4.4 million, while that's below budget, that's kind of expected below budget.
Yeah,
So
it
it's not
was
like, hey, look at that, $4 million.
Yeah, this is not a surprise. This was
It's a
anticipated.
plan.
Yeah. And so as part of our plan, this is where we're kind of anticipating some of this extra unused budget that we could take out as part of our 24-25 reductions. Any questions on that before moving on? All right. So again, our year-end goals and analysis was to maintain a strong fund balance, reserves, and minimize staff reductions through increasing revenues and reducing expenditures. I wanted to identify about $2.5 million in MSOC and miscellaneous costs at the end of the 23-24 school year, so we could target these as part of our 24-25 reductions. And then to point out our stabilization funding. So for the last couple of school years, we were intentionally building up our fund balance reserves by using our funding, our staffing, mostly our basic education staffing in ESSER funds. And that allowed us to build up our fund balance the last couple of years. However, this is coming to an end. We had about $2.8 million at the end of for the 23-24 school year, which we were required to spend by the end of this school year, which we did. So any sort of additional stabilization funding, COVID dollars, ESSER, are not available for the 24-25 school year and beyond. Any questions before I move on to ASB?
Yeah, I guess I'm still a little confused because when I look at the slide that you've got on the 8.9 million of the targeted reductions that we did, to me, it's not really adding up with that we're beating budget by 4 million. My thought was we were supposed to have already spent that 2 million that we had put into budget reductions for the 23-24. So we'd be basically not have that anymore. And so my interpretation is that it was a benefit that we still have that, and we weren't necessarily planning on still having that. Because then when I look at these targets for the 8.9 million, it doesn't say anything about the banked 2 million that we are apparently now continuing to push along. I would have thought we already used that.
Yeah, I think it just we got to go back to, we were doing the January of 23 when we passed that resolution. And at the time, we didn't know how we were going to use this funds. We were going to use in the offset budget reductions, but in the way of how we're going to implement it. And I think we had some additional savings in the 22-23 school year. And so it's just allowed us to use that fund balance as a way to gradually draw down on it over multiple years instead of using it in one big chunk.
I see it as a benefit, but I don't see it in this analysis that it's part of the savings factored in. So it's kind of just sitting there almost separate to the side, because in my mind, we would have spent it. So the fact we didn't have to spend it means, great, we did better than we were supposed to, but then shouldn't that mean we can be less conservative maybe in this year or something? Because we shouldn't be just carrying this
Correct.
offset along. So to me, we really are 4 million ahead, because in my mind, we were setting that aside to spend it to offset reductions. We didn't spend it. It's not reflected on here as part of our target 8.9 million. So really, we ended up saving through all these reductions, plus what were in there, 10 million. That's kind of where I'm at.
I guess I think when we were developing the projections, this was anticipated, and this allows us to use that fund balance. I think, yes, you are correct. We can be less conservative and draw down on these fund balance reserves when we're considering future budget reductions. So we're using some of them. Part of the resolution tonight is using part of that 2.8 million. We're going to draw down on it. And then we're probably going to be drawing down on it by the end of the 24-25 school year as well.
question, Sean, some of that is timing differences and shifting expenditures between years. And a question I have, I believe that part of the increase in the ending fund balance is the fact that a significant amount of money on the softball field is actually being spent in the new budget year. Not, so 5.5 million got transferred out.
Correct. So this anticipates that that 5.5 will be spent. Yes. ASB, so our ASB fund is designated for activities or events which are cultural, social, recreational, athletic in nature, and also optional non-credit extracurricular event. And this fund is primarily financed from the collection of fees, fines, and donations. So this year, again, healthy activity in the ASB. Overall revenues was an increase of about $160,000 from last year. Then with the breakdown by athletics, clubs, and general student body, with most of the biggest increase coming in at the athletics level. And then the clubs as well, seeing healthy activity. This is just a comparison of the revenues compared to prior year. Again, we're seeing increases generally especially at the clubs, again, clubs, athletics, and general student body. And then our expenditures, slight increase up from last year. And again, our largest areas of expenditures, again, athletics, clubs, and general student body. And then the same data in comparison to prior year. And then it has about $350,000 in capacity. So that's that's removed. So you can see the comparison between actual with and without budget capacity. So on the revenue side, doing better on the about 2 to 3%. And then the expenditures jump up about 87% of budget spent. And then comparisons to fund balance, actual versus budget. So we did about $170,000 better than what we had projected. So it's still in a good range, and we're seeing healthy growth in the fund balance and activity wise, especially since coming out of the COVID lockdown. Capital projects. So again, the purpose of the capital projects is to fund construction and major improvements. Just a comparison between actual and budget, our support, our revenues made up of the Mission View land sale, some rental income, our investment interest income, and then some additional budget capacity was part of that budget. And then state special purpose was made up the CTE grant, general fund transfers, and the softball field. On the expenditure side, we had the valet remodel, some fire alarm upgrades, remodeling of the Wenatchee High School bathrooms, and then followed by the baseball turf replacement and the softball field. In comparison to how we budget versus actual, so here we have a very large variance, about 2.7 million. This is due most in part to the softball field, and this is a timing difference. So basically, the budget anticipated the completion of the softball field by August 31st, but construction is still ongoing and being finalized. So any expenditures that occur after September 1st will be recorded in the 24-25 school year. And so that's why you have such a big difference here. So we'll see those expenditures in the current year as opposed to 23-24. Moving on to debt service. So we have our one outstanding bond. And the biggest activity this year was the refinancing of the bond. So we can see there with the $53 million with other financing sources and about other financing uses. So again, when you're looking at the budget, when we created the budget, we weren't anticipating a refinancing, but we were able to take advantage of that opportunity during the school year. So now we see it reflected and why we have the variances on there. In comparison to where actual versus budget, we finished about $930,000 more this year, again, all due to the bond refinancing. District paid less in the bond interest this year. We have some one-time costs, about $325,000 for underwriter fees related to pre-financing. And then because of the refinancing, the district will go out and certify a smaller property tax amount for the 2025 calendar year, this is where we start seeing the savings for the taxpayers as we go out for a smaller amount based on the updated bond schedule. Any questions on debt service before moving on? Last but not least, transportation vehicle. Again, purpose is purchase and repair of yellow school buses. Revenues and expenditures. So our revenue sources are investment interest income, and then the state depreciation reimbursement we receive on our school buses. The district budgeted to receive 3 buses this year. The district received 2 of them in September and 1 in February, and that's reflected on our budget. I think one of the things here, so we finished about $150,000 better than budget, and that's due in part to one, receiving larger reimbursement from the state than was projected on the model, which is always nice. And then our buses came in cheaper than the quoted prices, so there were savings on that. And so overall savings about $150,000 and on healthy fund balance for the transportation vehicle fund moving forward. Conclusion, so year-end projections. So we are starting the year on point with our projections that were presented to the board in June. Again, the exception is the capital projects. Again, that's just a timing difference. Fund balance better than budget, but it is overall decreasing, even excluding softball field costs. So on the right, we have about a decrease of about $670,000. And again, district's commitment to increasing revenues and reducing expenditures to maintain those fund balance reserves and minimize staff reductions. So looking at reducing the committed fund balance of by about $670,000. And then again, the between the $2 and the $2.5 million and savings we identified this year will be incorporated into our 24-25 budget reductions. And then overall, again, we've exhausted all COVID-related funding that will not be available going forward. And then just pointing out that revenues did remain comparable to prior year, while expenditures had increased by almost $3 million. Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate your time. I just also want to thank you for all the time and effort that goes into what you share with the community and what you share with the school board during this time on how we're managing our resources and our taxpayer dollars in a fiscally responsible way. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Okay, and on to the draft levy resolution. So this is very similar to like a first read. We have the draft resolution for the 2025 levy for the Wenatchee School District. The board has heard numerous presentations on the upcoming renewal levy for the Wenatchee School District. October 8th, we had levy basics. October 14th, we had a presentation with our financial and legal experts. On October 22nd, Sean took us through a more detailed collection rate and numbers analysis. And then just last week, November 6th, we had a special presentation or a special meeting with a short presentation from Sean and Diana, and then the board voted on collection rates and numbers. And so the resolution tonight outlines the proposal or the proposed 4-year renewal levy that would authorize a levy rate required to produce the amount stated at $2.20 per $1,000 of assessed value. And the board will vote on this resolution during the November 26th board meeting. And that's all I have, unless there's some discussion or questions that Sean or I could address.
I do have a question.
Oh, sorry.
One at a time. Reading through this resolution, I did not see any language in it that indicated if we did not pass it in February that it would be able to be recertified for the April special election. And I thought that was going to be one of the contingencies kind of automatically made available versus calling a special meeting on the day of the election.
Correct. We do need to check on that. So Sean and I will check with Lee Marquisio from Foster Garvey and see what other districts are doing in those cases. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Julie. I appreciate it.
And Corey, if I can, I was going to ask the same question, but with an extra wrinkle. The question is not, can you use this resolution, but can you modify the rates? That was Julie's question last time. Is it reusable only in identical format? Or can it be modified if for some reason there'd be a decision or preference to run a slightly different levy?
Fantastic. Thank you for that reminder. We'll have you an answer by the Friday Weekly, so you can be prepared for that. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Good question, Julie. Okay, keeping up with the agenda here, we move into a policy first read. And so we have 5 policies that were in our October Policy Committee meeting here. And so the first policy, 3205, this policy was rewritten to comply with the 2024 Title IX regulations. Just in summary, it relates a commitment to learning and work environment free from discrimination. It reiterates that there is that harassment is prohibited on the basis of sexual orientation, gender expression, and gender identity. The district, it also shares that the district will address and investigate all allegations. And then it goes over the investigation process, notice, and training in that policy. So I don't know if there's any questions or discussions on this policy.
I just had a question because it links, it indicates that the procedures found in there, but it doesn't attach the procedure. Are there any procedural, I mean, it looked fairly straightforward. So nothing jarring at all. I was just wondering, is there anything procedurally that we need to be aware of will happen because of this? Or
As I read through the procedures, I didn't feel like there was anything that would heighten awareness from the board. It mostly further outlines those investigated processes and really what the compliance officer does during those sessions. And it outlines it step by step, which is great because we need those specific outlines to guide in those touchy situations. Yep. But we can definitely share those with the board too, if you want to look at that for some light reading.
you just wanted
Yeah.
heads up if there's any substantive changes that we need to be aware of that we might hear about and not be on, not know about.
I will add that there was a lot of massaging. I think that the work of the compliance officer grew exponentially through this. And so if we were to have a Title IX complaint on sexual harassment or discrimination, it just kind of magnifies the work. So, which is good because it does that in this case on the side of protecting our students. And then the one you see a little bit later is on the side of protecting our staff. Yeah, great question. Okay, don't turn that off. Okay, moving on to policy 1400, meeting conduct, order of business, and quorum. So this policy outlines that the board will conduct meetings according to the law and to its own policies, outlining meetings, special meetings, emergency meetings, lots of meetings. Describes the parameters for each type of meeting described in detail and outlined to help guide when action is needed. Outlines for emergency remote meetings are also spelled out. There's some language modification in the public notice section for community members with disabilities. Other areas are covered, meeting conduct, public comment, public hearings, and meeting recordings. As we know, the law changed with regard to meeting recordings, and we did not have a section on public hearing. So all of those pieces were either massaged or added on this policy.
I have questions.
Yeah.
Okay, start from the top. So the public attendance and comment, I think we should clarify because it says the board will have Spanish interpretation available at all board meetings. I think I would clarify that for the public comment. Because just because it's under the heading doesn't make it clear that it's for the public comment, unless we're gonna have somebody standing up to interpret all board meetings.
We used to.
Aren't we obligated to have that available? Like
We,
with notice?
for the public comment or with notice, for an accommodation. Yes, but in general, we're not required to translate the meetings real time. That option is available if they rewatch it later. We tried at one point to have it available, and we had it available, I think, for the public hearings. So if that's just so you know, I read that as the intent that we are gonna make translation available for the entire meeting, not just public comment. And we've always said it's available for public comment at the meeting, but we have not in years made it available for the entire meeting without a specific request for an accommodation or because there was some heightened activity going on. But it's always been available immediately after the meeting and posted and I recall our translators have had trouble trying to keep up during the meetings. So I just want to make clear, because if it's meant to modify and apply just to the comment period, I think it should be clearer in that sentence.
Where are you?
Just right there, it says public attendance and comment. It says the board will have, the new proposed language is the board will have Spanish interpretation available at all board meetings. That as written suggests that it will be available for the entire duration of the meeting. And that has not been traditionally done, but we have always indicated that translation will be available, interpretation or translation will be available for the public comment portion. So I just want to clarify the intent there, because I'm reading it broadly that it'll cover the entire meeting, and that's a different beast. And I would love if we got there. I just don't know if that's what we're intending to do.
And I wonder if that was, I mean, I feel like it's because it's under the public attendance and comment section. I feel like that maybe that's implied, but maybe be more explicit. Yeah.
I think it'd be worth doing a legal check on exactly where accommodation ends and in terms of timing and situations, because I'm not 100% familiar, but I believe it's pretty extensive if you give notice that you require translation for a purpose, and separately from helping a person make public comment. And I think the outer limits of what state law and regulations are on that issue are important to set the wording.
Yeah, my general understanding is that we don't currently have a legal obligation to just in general, provide it the whole meeting in Spanish. But if somebody came and requested as an accommodation, we could work on an individual level with the person to provide an accommodation. Yeah.
That's what I understand.
And so I just don't think it's clear enough, if the intent is just that it's provided during comment, I don't think it's clear enough just being under that comment section without some type of clarification in that sentence. The translation will be available at all board meetings for public comment. Because that I think we've always generally applied without request for a specific accommodation.
So if you look at public notice sections, it says individuals who may need modification or participate in regular special board meeting, including those with disability or those requiring language interpreting services.
Right. That's
Contact within, no later than 2 days before the meeting.
correct. And that would be for those situations to ask for an accommodation to have that done. But what concerns me is without the modification below, it almost sounds like, well, hey, I don't need to do that because you've said down here that translation is going to be available for all meetings. Even though it's under a different heading, I just don't think it's clear enough. And so if we can make it clearer, if it's meant to only apply to the public comment, that it's just generally available without a request for accommodation, that would, I think, avoid some confusion. Because I think they would still always continue to have that option to request as an accommodation.
That did get changed from the last time, from when we initially reviewed it, didn't we? Because we also had the time in there. Right.
It got changed from when the policy committee,
Yeah.
when we met in
Uh-huh.
October. Okay. Back, just back to Julie's comment. Julie, are you thinking that that last sentence in that first paragraph could read, the board will have Spanish interpretation available at all board meetings for public comment? Gotcha.
Well, and that's what I was trying to say
Yeah.
there was more to that. When the policy committee, met. I remember we talked about having,
Oh,
giving Spanish speakers 4 minutes versus 3.
yeah, we did cut some things out.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, it probably got lost in that shuffle or the meaning.
Mhm.
Um,
I think so too.
So yeah,
Okay.
for public comments, that works.
Are
Yeah,
the
so
4 and 3 minutes in procedures or in the policy?
Say that again? If it said Spanish speakers would get 4 minutes, English would get 3. We decided to make it 3 because time is time, whether you speak in Spanish or English. So we just took it out completely.
Yeah, and just on my quick review, I don't even see a reference to the 3 minutes in here for
Right.
general public comment, so it's probably a procedural thing.
That was my question.
Got it.
Yeah,
Is it in the procedure?
no, yeah, it's not,
Rather than in the policy?
might be.
We didn't review procedure.
there is reference to 3 minutes in this policy.
There's reference to 3 minutes in the hearing section. I noticed that was added. But
It's also in the policy. Kim and I went over it this morning. I don't know exactly where it is, but there is wasn't there, Kim? Almost positive. You and I both. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. The part that's struck just says the board may structure oral public comment to determine total time allotted, equally apportioning the minutes for each speaker, but doesn't specifically state, at least that I can tell, but
Okay.
anyway.
Okay, we'll make.
I feel like it was in here too, but I don't. Oh, yeah, I see it.
It was in the public hearing where I saw it.
Yeah, it's definitely in the public hearing section,
Okay.
but moving.
Okay, well, we will make sure that the 3 minute is in the public attendance and comment section too, because that is important for us to continue to maintain that expectation and have it in our policy.
A maximum of 20 speakers will be heard at each meeting. Each speaker can speak for not more than 3 minutes.
There it is.
That's the new proposed language, and so that was.
Oh, but that's for special. That's for public hearings, right?
No, this is a minute, the new language you added is a minimum of 20 speakers will be heard at each meeting. This is still into that public attendance. And this is where my second comment was gonna be,
Correct.
it is newly added, so it wasn't there before. I would prefer to do a maximum allowance of like 90 minutes, even though I know it's a long time, rather than limit it by number of speakers, because some speaker could speak for 1 minute, some speaker could speak for 2 minutes. If you just say our total time allotted is not to exceed 90 minutes for, I know that's a long time, but I just hate the idea of showing up to a room full of people and saying, okay, we're only gonna hear from the first 20 of you versus just saying, here's our time, you fit it in. And that's what I am used to seeing more is a full-on time limit. And so people can decide how they want to structure. And we would still maintain the 3 minutes per speaker, but versus doing an actual, we're only gonna let 20 people speak.
My concern about putting a time limit versus a speaker limit is that the logistics of so many people sign up thinking they're gonna speak, and then you could cut them off after, if there's 50 speakers, you might need to cut them off at 30 speakers. And I recall, Kim, you mentioned that this is the direction that a lot of other school districts are moving in, which.
Yeah, I think it's easy. It's just a management issue though, because if we say we have a policy that says our maximum allowed possible time for public comment is 90 minutes, we don't even necessarily have to say it until people start speaking. We say, hey, by the way, we've got 90 minutes is our maximum allowed time. We've got 30 minutes left. So, kind of organize your speakers accordingly, knowing that we've got 30 minutes left at 3 minutes a person. And that kind of gives them the flexibility to say, okay, I've already spoken or whatnot. And then you just cut it off, say, okay, we've got 2 minutes left. We'll hear from 2 more speakers and then be done with it. So to me, that's easy enough. I get why other schools do it the per person because it feels like a easy, safe way to do it. But to me, it is not in the spirit of actually listening to the community. And so that's why I want to say, like, yeah, 90 minutes is a really long time, but 20 minutes at 3 minutes a piece is only an hour. And some people aren't going to say, and no, I don't want to be here all night for a meeting, but having some expectation that we are here to, hear them. I'm not opposed to, I prefer seeing the time limits. I think they're easier to manage.
But I mean, it seemed like when last year when we were dealing with the Columbia, like big meetings, there were a lot of people that said, who would come up to say, I kind of want to echo what everyone's saying. So if you say we have 20 people, like, are you adding anything new? And that might get them to say, I'm going to pass on my comment because I'm just repeating, as opposed to saying, well, I got 90 minutes. I can say my 3 minutes and go from there.
But then you also, when it's something so small like that, you also get, what if people start learning the system and gaming it and sign up to fill the first 20 spots? And so the same people speak all the time and don't get other opportunities. So, this hasn't been a problem. We've had very few meetings where there have been substantial comments. I think if we're going to put something in policy about limitations on comments, I would prefer a longer based on total time, saying in no circumstance will we entertain public comment for more than 90 minutes. And that way we know going into any meeting that, okay, there may be a room full of people, but we are not going to listen to comments for more than 90 minutes. It may be 25, it may be 50 if they're short or whatnot, but in no regard are we going beyond 90 minutes. I know it sounds like a lot, and I think it's rare that we'd ever hit something like that, but I feel like putting a finite number on something gives you an opportunity to kind of game the system a little bit.
Julie, just a quick question on that. Would you still limit the individual time as well?
Yes.
Because otherwise you could have someone
Correct.
monopolizing.
Right. So it would be, and I mean, this also gets into the English Spanish situation too. If it's 20 speakers, you have less control of the time, because what if it's, 20 speakers that require translation? So I do think imposing a more generous maximum time limit to say, to the extent we're going to have any policy that regulates public comment, it's a 90-minute window. And I think it's pretty easy for the board chair to just kind of regulate and tell people, hey, we're 60 minutes in. So, we only have 30 minutes left for comments. If your comments already been said, we'd, prefer to hear some from new comments.
How do we regulate the gaming of the system in either way? Because even if you have it 20 individual people and they game the system and they get that, but it's like, if we still have 90 minutes, they can still do the same thing.
They can, but it makes it less likely, because if you're the first 20, you've filled all the slots. But it may not be as easy if you say we've got 90 minutes total. They may not know exactly if they're going to get to you or not, or it makes it a little less susceptible to.
How would you feel about if the 20 are filled up, we have 5 additional slots? What if we said it's 10 additional slots and then it's the same 90 minutes? So now now you're guaranteeing, even if you have a Spanish speaker who's taking 7 minutes, they would still have the maximum number of people that the 90 minutes would allow for. And then we'd also be able to free up spaces. So if you say, oh, we got all 20 taken up, well, now we just open up 10 more. And then so that we're still hitting the 90 minutes. And we're also, it sounds like what's consistent with some other districts, what they're doing, which is people as opposed to time.
And there are districts that do have time as well. Like I just looked at Quincy, they have theirs is 30 minutes for board meeting.
I had a slight unease from the sense of sounding like we were cutting off or not being receptive by having a quota at 20, then we can add 5, or what happens if it's really a major issue and there are 30 people in the room and somebody else would like to speak. And it was a sort of slightly ill at ease. And I hadn't thought about it before, but listening to the conversation, I think I would feel more comfortable with having a minute limit rather than a limit. One of the things that happens with a minute limit is, and I'll kind of make a lighthearted of it, at a state meeting I was at recently, a civil rights representative on the committee was the timekeeper and said, you guys, you got 25 PowerPoint pages left and to do, and you've only got 7 minutes left. You're not going to make it. But in a sense, if you have a time limit and there is a really passionate group, then people can recognize that and say, I'm not going to repeat what the other person said to make more time for the others. So I think either could work, but, and I don't know about 90 minutes, that's a long time. But I think it allows a little bit of, call it town hall flexibility to the group to, you know, either manage themselves. They've all got an individual limit of 3 minutes. And if and with a limit of 25 people, the person who says, I'm 17 in line and I only use 1 minute, doesn't have anybody to help. So that I rambled a little bit, but I think I would be slightly more comfortable with a time limit.
I just comment that one of the things we talked about was the limitation on the maximum time more for a public hearing versus a regular board meeting. Because we did those, 2 public hearings and we did set a time limit of 3 hours. And I don't know if, the intent here was to try to set a time limit for regular board meetings.
I think it's a very good comment, Kim, because if I were to go back and do it, I could see the reason for being more open and flexible in a public hearing, which is a more substantial issue. And then we could choose, a board meeting is a regular occurrence with the opportunity to repeat 2 weeks from now. So actually, I think I could also see if it was much more streamlined and simple to manage using the other count. So I'm kind of wishy-washy, but each side has a little bit of an advantage.
And I understood from the policy that the public hearing would be scheduled a little differently to have that flexibility of, really being the spot to hear from the community and have the, we did the 3 hours plus everybody have the individual. I would prefer to have, if we're going to impose a limit for regular meetings, that it be by time limit, whether it's 90 minutes, an hour, and it's something just to construe, this is the maximum time we allow. It's not to say that this is the expectation, but it's just to say this is the maximum time we allow. So I was deferring more on the longer side because when I did the math, 20 speakers at 3 minutes was about 60 minutes. So I was like, well, 20 speakers in my mind doesn't feel like a lot, especially when we get on some of these big topics. That's why in my head, I kind of went to 90 minutes saying, at the most, we would do like 90 minutes as a limitation. But again, just for the regular board meetings, I realize that's not necessarily the purpose of the board meeting, but since we do have to allow for some public comment, in most other, it may not be the common way in school districts, but most other municipalities that I work with, when they do impose a limit, it's by time, not number of speakers.
We could do either. I think 90 minutes is an awfully long time for, I also think that when you put a time limit, you are restricting the number of speakers, especially in our community where you have bilingual speakers, because even 60 minutes and say half of them are bilingual, average of 7 minutes, 3 minutes in English, 4 minutes in Spanish, it's less than 20 speakers, significantly less. But again, 90 seems like a long time.
Do we want to say something like, if we have an hour and a half of public comment, that triggers a hearing? Like we've had 30 people sign up to do public comments, and because we still have to get through regular board meeting tenants, that we will put together a public hearing for this issue instead? Or is that like a disaster waiting to happen if we have multiple issues at the same board meeting.
Yeah, I mean, it just wouldn't be unless the subject matter requires a hearing. You only have a hearing because you're obligated by law to have a particular, because a hearing is a particular type of meeting that is different. It's on the record. We have to keep special minutes. Certainly, I think if there's interest in a subject, then we can either expect to hear from people more during regular meetings, or we can decide if like a special town hall type meeting is appropriate. But yeah, to me, in my mind, looking at this, just looking at a flat number of speakers looks speech chilling versus inviting. And so when I see a time limit saying the board will allocate a maximum of X time at a meeting for public comment, it looks more inviting. And then, because then we just leave it to the community to say, fit your comments in if you think. I went with 90 because I felt like that allows for some of the, it may not be exactly 60 to get through them. And I know it sounds like a long time, but we're talking about maximum limits on public comment. So I don't know. That was just my preference.
I think it's important to provide a platform for public comment. However, when we do have when we have people show up for a specific topic, that is just one piece or two pieces of the agenda at the most. Normally it's one. And so are we allowing an hour and a half of of our meeting time to be monopolized by one agenda item? So that's, I think I'm a no for 90 minutes just because, again, it's just a long time. And we do meet every two weeks. Whoever mentioned that.
Why don't Kim and I put together a couple of different options and we can show those to the board through the weekly update, and then we can maybe have further discussion when it comes to the second reading. We'll put together as maybe a 60-minute option and a 90-minute option, and we can then talk about what that might look like.
Yeah, I mean, I think absent having it specifically written in here, we have that flexibility to do that kind of ad hoc anyway. Because without the language struck out, we have the ability to regulate the public comment period. This would just make it, our regulation is set per this policy. So.
I just think it's really hard in the moment to set that. Yeah. when you have the 30 to 50 people that are here. So if we're going to regulate that, I think we should have it in policy. It seems like this is how we do business moving forward.
And I think just because it says 20 in writing doesn't mean we can't open up the space for 25 plus 5. We don't want to overpromise, right?
But that just gets back to the when do we decide to exercise the adding 5 and the adding 5 more, and then why are we writing this down in policy when we've got that ad hoc ability to do stuff anyway? So, I didn't mean to make it so controversial. When I look at these things, I'm used to seeing them in terms of like a maximum time limit. And yeah, that's not the purpose of our meeting or the point of our meeting, but we are also, serving 75,000 students and a whole bunch of staff in or 76,000 students now, or 69. Sorry, but I'm living in the past. But it's subjects of interest. So I want to avoid the appearance of that we don't want to hear from, but is that the point of our meeting? No, but does state law say we have to have public comment available? Yeah, what's the fine line without making anyone feel like we don't want to hear from them? So I don't know, sorry.
Point well taken, though. I appreciate that. And any other? We have Kim and I have two to-do items on 1400. Any other thoughts on 1400?
Sorry, I just had one more. In the public hearing section, you have a sentence that says the board president shall designate a time limit for public presentations. And then down below it says testimony will be taken, speakers will be given a maximum of 3 minutes. Should clarification be there, the president shall designate the time for the total hearing? the total time for the hearing? Because it,
I mean, that's what it's meant to say,
okay,
yes.
I think maybe just a
So-
little clarification on that, because it looks a little inconsistent, like you get to set the speaking limit, but then down below you said it's 3 minutes.
Yeah, it would read better if the board president shall designate a time limit for public hearings. Just in general. Yep, that would be a good, we can fix that. I appreciate that. No, that's great. Good clarity. I appreciate that, because the more clear, the better that we are able to execute that. So thank you. The next policy is 3141, non-resident students. This has some updated language in section D. Choice requests may be revoked at any time if the student's continued enrollment poses a risk to the health or safety of other students or staff. If the student has engaged in violent or disruptive behavior, if the student is suspended or expelled from the school district, or if the student has been convicted of a crime or crimes. And so that's the updated choice policy information there. And we didn't have much conversation there. Any discussion from the board? Okay. Policy 6815, which is advertising on school district property. The policy outlines when and where advertising can and cannot take place on school district property. During our conversation, we were asked to cross-reference city ordinances on posting signage on fences. And we went to the city ordinances and looked up 10.50.020.3C, which is exemptions for private property. We also looked at 10.50.160 on temporary signs, and then another on allowable temporary signs, and believe that we are in accordance with the city. Yes. Okay, appreciate that. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay, and the last one is policy 5011, which is sexual discrimination and sex-based harassment of district staff. So very similar to the first policy 3205, but this one is for the adults in the school district. So this is the staff-based version of the sexual harassment policy. And this outlines pre-employment restrictions and the Title IX regulations, which have been updated. So policy also covers investigation and staff training. Any thoughts or comments here? Excellent. Okay, well, that concludes our first read. I appreciate the time on that and the deep reading that everyone engaged in. So the next piece, the next is our action item. And so this action authorizes the use of, which we discussed a little bit earlier during Sean's presentation, authorizes the use of the $2.9 million that the board had previously set aside to manage phased reductions. And so the remaining amount, which is about $2.2 million, as we are doing our diligence to utilize these funds to slow the gradual decline of the fund balance. For the 2023-24 school year, we used almost 700,000 of that and plan to use more, if not the remainder this year, as Sean described earlier during his presentation. So that's all I have for the board. President Norton, if you want to go back and look for a motion from the board, that would be excellent.
Do I have a motion?
I move approval of resolution 0724, reducing the general fund committed fund balance for the 2024-25 school year and future school years as presented to us.
I second.
It's been moved by Martin, second by Miranda. Is there any discussion? I guess I just have questions. If the funds already set aside for offsetting budget reduction and we're using those funds to offset budget reductions, why do we need to re-up the resolution? Why are we not just able to draw down for the authorized purpose?
I think it's because of the work, and Sean, you can help me correct this, but I think it's because of the original resolution that was done in January of 2023, and we have to continue that resolution as long as those funds remain. Is that, would you say?
Yeah, I think that sums it up correctly. Yeah.
It is maybe because that resolution then set it up for use in 23, 24, and 24, 25, and because we're now proposing to take them into 25, 26. Is that why we need to do this?
We might. It depends on how we finish this year, because it is a possibility we may end up using it the remainder for the 24-25 school year.
So a continued spending resolution, is that what this is?
Yeah,
In regards to Julie's, since we've already spent, it's Julie's question, since we've already spent some of it, right?
Correct.
For last year.
Yeah.
Correct.
So it's a continued resolution for this year.
Correct.
Yep. And I think what Sean is planning for overall, and what we're planning for in the district, is that the fiscal responsibility of these dollars, as Sean's 4-year projections are out there, and we all know, is that, we could lose up to 2.8 to $3 million to $3.5 million over the next 4 years. And we're trying to preserve that fund balance longitudinally so that we don't dip into that 5% fund balance over the long term. And so using the dollars in a phased approach, fiscally responsible approach, will allow us to continue to keep dollars in that fund balance over time. And I don't know if I summarized that as well as Sean would have, but I know that that's the work that he's working on with us.
Can I ask a question? Because it does seem a little strange way of doing business to me, but the way I interpret it is that defines those monies as being committed to a specific purpose, like a restricted fund balance, and that committed purpose is related to that, not be moved for something else.
No, I think that's correct, Martin. And I think with committed fund balances, when these are funds, these are specifically authorized and utilized by the board. So always seeking the board's permission and working with it. Because when we did the budget, we didn't know, we hadn't closed the year out over the summer. So we didn't know how many of the funds we were going to utilize for 23 or 24 school year. Now we do. So that's what we're kind of reflecting here. We closed at the year end. We had this money authorized. Now we're reflecting the updated amount.
So, I mean, what's not making sense to me is, because I understand the restricted spending, totally get that we're setting it up as a pool for restricted funding. My problem is we set it up as a pool for restricted funding to offset certain things, and seeming that we set it up to be spent for certain things. And my problem that I'm running into is we're not spending it for the things that we set it up to spend it for, because we originally set it up to look at impacts in 2 years, which was 23, 24, and 24, 25. And there may still be some fallout for 23, 25. And now I feel like we're being asked to put $2 million on the shelf again. And so I'm not looking, I didn't interpret these to be a savings account that we were looking into. We just had this savings that we were going to earmark to make sure we could use it in future years. And so my concern is we're laying staff off, we're doing things, and yet we're sitting here with this pool of money that we already knew wasn't going to send us below our fund balance when we set it up to help avoid some of those things. And now we're, instead of hiring more teachers or doing some of these things that it was intended for, because, our enrollment's not that bad and things like that, we're still putting it on a shelf. That's my concern.
Okay, so I think it's just the shelf. We have to see how 24-25 does. So for the 24-25 school year, we have a budgeted deficit of $4.6 million. If I don't anticipate it, we would incur a $4.6 million deficit. But if we close out the year end and let's say we finish with a $3 million deficit, the $2 million here would be fully utilized by the end of the 24-25 school year.
But Julie, you're just saying that if we don't know we're going to run a $4.6 million deficit and we don't spend the money and we make a bunch of cuts in anticipation of that, and then we end up with like, hey, we're even, but we're really plus 2 million. So you're kind of saying, let's leave that in the bank, expecting that we're going to spend it at the start of next.
By the end of this school year.
At the end of this school year. So, I mean, it sounds like we just should incorporate this money into the discussion when we start talking about budget cuts for next year.
Yes,
Or
and,
this year.
and it has, these dollars have been incorporated into those conversations
Yes.
that we've been having. And I think this year without the ESSER dollars, we're going to be utilizing every bit of this.
Yeah, it's quite possible.
So the way I understand this is last year we approved resolution 0123, which allowed spending authority of these funds for the 23-24 school year.
And the 24-25 school year.
Okay, it's not in there, so I can't see if the resolution itself states 24-25. I'm looking back at the January meeting packet from January 24, 2023. It was an action item, but unfortunately the resolution is not attached. So because I can't see it, I'm interpreting, and it sounds like I'm wrong, that we allowed the resolution for the 23-24. Now there is carryover money. So now we're allowing for that continued continued spending into 24-25.
Yeah, the original resolution 0123 has the managed phase budget reductions for 23-24 and 24-25 school years.
And I guess that's where I'm confused. If we already approved 24-25, why do we need to do this now? Because it's contemplated being used within this year. And so as long as you're using things for an approved purpose within the restricted fund, we don't generally approve every, balance of every fund. So that's why I'm a little confused. Did the prior resolution account for 21-22 and 22-23? And now we need to add 24-25, or it just feels unusual, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around it a little bit.
So the original resolution accounted for 24-25. But part of the resolution, the second resolution, I can't think of the number that is referenced in this. So there's 3 resolutions referenced in this resolution. So just to make it more clear. But the second resolution discusses the resolution back in August for the budget adoption. And so I was authoring of kind of a full carryover because I didn't know the amount, no one knew the amount that would actually had been used for 23-24 school year at that time. We needed to close the books at year end in October to realize what we actually utilized for the 23-24 school year. So this is just really clarifying what is actually in the committed fund balance for 24-25 and beyond.
So it's almost like a bank statement update. Here's what we've used, and here's what we need to continue to use.
Yes.
Appreciate that.
But I guess I mean, that's where I am struggling to come in. If we already set them aside in a restricted fund, don't they just stay in the restricted fund absent any action to draw them down? And we don't generally have
I guess back in August, I was taking a belt and suspenders approach to it. So it's just identifying we had a $2.8 million in committed fund balance. We didn't know how much we were going to use for the 23-24 school year. So now we're just adjusting it.
It almost sounds like we're doing an adjustment of value each year. And I guess I would ask the question, if that resolution did not terminate, sunset, which it appears that it didn't, the original one, then this is more like an update of the remaining balance.
Yes.
And, since it's not my knowledge field, is it necessary to have a resolution or simply an updated report?
Well, considering that there was a resolution in August, I would move forward with this one so the correct amount is reflected in the fund balance.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. Dotting the I's and crossing the T's. Any other thoughts or conversation?
Motion's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Oh. Unanimous. Moving on to, I believe, superintendent report.
Okay, jumping in here. I had the pleasure last Tuesday of attending the 23rd Annual Innovator Awards Luncheon from NCW Tech Alliance, which was amazing. There was a packed convention center, and the Wenatchee High School AEM Energy students won the K-12 Innovator Awards with the work that they're doing to save energy and energy consumption in a variety of nationwide chains, and then locally with Lincoln Elementary. So it was just great. It was a wonderful evening. The students stole the show with their thank yous to the school district, to the high school, and to their teachers, and calling out their CTE coordinators. And it was just really, really special. And all 8 students were able to say thank you. And it was just a proud moment for the Wenatchee School District and the Wenatchee High School, and just an assurance that amazing things that are happening. Also, speaking of amazing, I went to Wenatchee High School to check in on their Veterans Day Assembly last Friday, and just happened to be there for the school-wide send-off for the girls cross country team. So that was great. Literally walked in and the passing period had started, and just students and teachers were lining the hallways as the drum line is coming through. So very special, and we have more of those coming, which is very cool. But I was able to watch the Veterans Day Assembly that showcased a retired Army Command Sergeant Major Jim Cook, who is a JROTC paraeducator, who recently retired from the Army after 23 years of service. So it was really great to hear his story. It was both compelling and inspirational, and very, very rewarding. So it was great. And we have other sports heading to state, which is exciting. Girls soccer, and they'll host Kent Ridge tomorrow night at 6 o'clock in the Apple Bowl. So how exciting is that? We have volleyball that will be heading off to state tournament November 23rd or 22nd, 23rd. And then girls swim and dive will head off to state this week. I think our dive is tomorrow and swim is on Friday, if I remember correctly. So lots of amazing things to celebrate within the world of athletics and sports. So, oh, did I did? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. They're going on November 22nd to 23rd. Okay.
But you did not mention our state champion cross-country runner.
I did not mention that. They did great. Yes. Yep. I'll leave that for you, Julie.
I don't have anything today, no.
I had the distinct pleasure of going to the Orchard Middle School band, mariachi, and strings recital the end of last month, and I was really impressed with the hard work that all the students had done. I've been to a lot of really bad music recitals, mostly playing in them, and they did a great job. And I was impressed both with the work of the students had done and the instructors had done. So that was cool. And then state's a big deal. Congratulations to all those students that are going. Congratulations to, I looked it up, Kayla Madriaga. Thank you for winning state cross country. Like, that's awesome.
No, you go last. We've got a hierarchy to respect. I kind of have a record number of comments, and because I think one of the board members' most valuable tasks is to encourage high achievement, and boy, did we have it in spades recently. Activities that are made possible, and what I want to hit is the themes of community partnership, and they're all examples of programs whose existence depends on supplemental funding from the local levy. So I actually got my Apple Leaf today and began reading it. And so one of the items in there is the German exchange student program. This has been going on for 30 years. Students come every 2 years from Germany and spend 3 years with us. It's a cultural exchange. So what do they take them to show them? They show mariachi and Beauty of Bronze, 2 unique programs. And actually, I have a Herrenberg coffee cup I still drink out of occasionally from when we hosted somebody about 25 years ago. So that's kind of an achievement. They list 43 ASB clubs, and it's possibly not complete in this edition. Then I just want to prove that sometimes I'm nasty. There's an editorial on not making librarians a priority, which happens to be something that I very much agree with, the student editorial. And I've advocated personally, I think this is a short-sighted thing to do. Libraries and librarians as the specialist guides there are exploration centers. They complement all other teaching. They bridge between disciplines. I've seen that after school and other areas. And I'll just quote a part of this thing, passion for reading and knowledge and their desire to share it with others. So I can't resist putting in a dissenting plug for libraries. Then, Corey, you made us look or told us the Panther Press videos. So really, you can find them on YouTube or Bing videos as 4 or 5 minutes of really positive impact news from the high school. Super impressive. Then Dia de los Muertos was recently. A year ago at Dia de los Muertos, I think it was a grandmother bent my ear for all about 15 minutes about how we desperately needed facilities for after school, especially in winter when there was nothing you could do outside, for all the good social reasons that prevent gang activity or anything else. So it was Dia de los Muertos again, and now we have the indoor soccer program on Sundays in Foothills. And a year ago, I was saying, well, I'm sorry, we can't really open the buildings. You got to have people, there's safety. And I was sort of walking back, saying we have the after schools program, but now there's a step being taken. And I think within the greater community, there is more of a hope than a plan. I think the YMCA and a vacant facility might do something elsewhere in the community for after school youth. So I think that's pretty important. Then I wanted to highlight some of our partners I talked about that at the AM Energy Champions. PUD are there all the time, really backing that up. And they came by coincidence the day after their award to Conference Rotary. You could have heard a pin drop in that room of adults as they talked about what they were doing. And then I want to say that that's not the only place where this kind of initiative is being taking place. We're going to have an exciting presentation on the 10th of December, aren't we, Corey, from the AP Environmental Science. And they're taking on more than energy, all sorts of other things. So that's what we're seeing in that area. Stuff the Bus, City of Wenatchee partnership. There was the mayor handing out leaflets, and our shared SROs. I want to give a huge shout out to them. Great effort, and people coming out of Walmart was super generous. Another aspect of it. And then third one I want to pick on our partners is the North Central Library. At the PAC meeting recently, they gave away 220 slim little books to encourage literacy and reading. And they had a booth in Metal Park for Dia de los Muertos doing a very similar thing. These are the kind of partners, I think they depend on us, we depend on them, and why having a healthy school district is so important. And then another day I had was joining the AVID as I said it offered to be a chaperone, but I really wasn't. Juniors to Eastern Washington and Gonzaga on that trip. And I talked to some of the juniors, and they already had their early acceptance at Eastern Washington through the program for which we approved the contract about 3 board meetings ago, so that they know that they have this safe house. And what I want to say is we talk about advanced education. We've got AVID, we've got college in the high school, we've got AP, we've got brilliant CTE programs, and AVID is right there with those advanced education things. And I was going to say, other people, I've come across other examples of school districts wanting to learn about us, and I already said that, because I think this is pretty amazing stuff. Congratulate the students and the mentors and the community partners.
First. All right.
Our job is to encourage and give people heart.
Very few things that I just want to, since this is our first regular meeting back since the conferences, say a big thank you to all of our teachers and staff who made conferences possible. I know it's a hard 3 days for them, long days for some of them. So appreciate that. It felt like it went pretty smooth as far as I know. So I was thankful for that effort. I enjoyed watching our ROTC present the colors at the hockey game last week as part of their weekend of Veterans Day festivities. So that was kind of neat. I took some pictures that maybe I'll forward, but they're pretty grainy. So glad to see them getting out and having events like that and being celebrated in the community. You mentioned it, first round of state soccer is tomorrow night at the Apple Bowl. The girls soccer finally gets a home game. So come cheer them on against Kent Ridge at 6 p.m. Hopefully the rain stays away. So yeah, a tremendous season by those girls. And then volleyball is the following week, and district musical I think is coming up too. So
Starts Thursday.
yeah, get your tickets if there's any left. And then Corey and I should be going to the interagency meeting, or not interagency, sorry, that's on tip of my brain. The Chelan County Leadership Meeting on Friday to get some more helpful suggestions from the port. That's all I've got. So if there's nothing else, no executive sessions tonight, we can adjourn.